Borderline personality disorder is a disorder of instability and impulsivity, if we want to look at it that way. By instability, we mean instability in their relationships, instability in their moods, instability in their behavior, and instability in their sense of self. So the world always feels like it's sort of moving up and down for them. Finally, there's also a tremendous fear of abandonment that always cuts through this disorder. So people who have borderline personality, in addition to all of that instability, live in chronic fear of real or even perceived abandonment. For example, someone even showing up late to dinner, that could be experienced as a frank abandonment, and then their response to that is very strong, often very angry, very upsetting, not only for the person with borderline personality, but for the other people involved.
But I feel like we're all a little bit like that.
Here's the thing. I don't disagree with you. And the issue with all personality disorders is that they refer to an extreme of personality, in essence, okay? So do we all get thrown off if we feel like somebody's gonna leave us? Maybe to a degree, especially if we love or care about that person. But we also have enough of a sense of self to say, I don't want them to go, but if they go, ultimately I'll be fine, I'll cry it out for a few days. We don't feel like we're gonna die. We don't feel like we have to violently or aggressively or verbally assault another person. Most of us have a very solid sense of identity. We may shift a little, say, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but by and large, I know I'm Ramani. We know who we are.
That's right.
For a person with borderline personality, that's constantly shifting sand.
They don't have a strong sense of self.
They do not.
Okay.
They do not. In fact, we would call it identity disturbance. It's not unusual, for example, for a person with borderline personality to want to change their name sometimes, or completely change their look and cut off all their hair, or change a color, or change how they even dress. That identity disturbance can be presented in a lot of different ways. And it can be sort of throw other people off in their world, saying, I thought you had this name last week and now you have this name. So it can be confusing.
Now there are 9 traits that would define someone who has borderline personality. But before we get into those, how is BPD, borderline personality disorder, different than all of these other personality disorders?
So as of right now, and this will change over time, there are 10 personality disorders in the diagnostic manual we call the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. There's also a different classification scheme called the ICD-10, or the International Classification of Diseases. I'm only making that technical point because people may run into that if they were to, for example, see a medical record.
Now, do you know if dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities, what it used to be called, is one of those 10?
Dissociative identity disorder is in a separate section of the diagnostic manual under a whole series of other dissociative disorders. And it is often misdiagnosed borderline personality. It's a very rare, DID is a very rare disorder. And many times people who are called DID, if you will, they actually have borderline personality.
Okay, so back to my original question. How does borderline personality disorder differ from all these other ones?
Borderline personality disorder is unique in the personality disorders for how unstable the emotional state of the person is. They will go from angry to sad to cheerful in the same hour. You will not see that kind of emotional instability with any other personality disorder.
Even bipolar disorder?
Bipolar is not a personality disorder. And frequently, borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder get misdiagnosed by lay people. People who are professionals in the field know the clear difference. The difference between borderline personality disorder, which is a personality disorder, and bipolar disorder, which is what we call a mood disorder, just like depression. Bipolar disorder is characterized by something called mania. Mania is a period of time, it could last 4 to 7 days, even longer, where the person has this incredibly expansive, excitable mood, sometimes even irritable. They can go for days without sleep. They could talk, and not stop. They'll empty everything out of their garage and you're not clear on what's going on. They'll drive to Vegas with their life savings. They'll spend, they'll have sex, they'll become very disinhibited. But that goes on for days. They will not in one day have a crash. They will stay in that sort of high for many days, and it's quite debilitating. It's not unusual for a person during a manic episode to end up requiring psychiatric hospitalization.
Yeah.
The reason borderline personality gets confused with bipolar disorder is because the person's moods are fluctuating so much. But if the moods are fluctuating in one day, that's more indicative of borderline personality. That's the difference.
Our founder of MedCircle actually is very open, saying that he has bipolar 2 disorder. And it's one of the reasons he's so passionate about this company, to help people get on the website, sign up for that free email digest, get the information that they need so that they can make healthier choices and be informed. Because like you said, an expert could decide if it's borderline personality, if it's bipolar, if it's all these other things. But me and most of the people watching, we don't know.
And it's that misconstrual is dangerous because the treatment for bipolar 1 or bipolar 2 is quite different than it is for borderline personality.
That's right.
And the fact of the matter is, you can have both of those disorders occurring at the same time. Bipolar with borderline personality. And in fact, in the realm of mental health, that combination of disorders may represent one of the greatest treatment challenges we have in the field. It requires very, very intensive treatment for a long time.
Wow. All right. This is going to help me, and I think a lot of the viewers truly understand it. What are the 9 traits? Let's go through them.
Okay, so the first trait we'll see is fear of abandonment. That abandonment can be real or it can be perceived. And by perceived, I mean that the person will feel, I've just had an argument with this person, they're going to leave me. So they're always preparing for this abandonment, and in trying to prepare for it all the time, they almost make it happen. You're going to leave me. You're cheating on me. Who are you with? You're never coming back. And they do this, and they kind of grind the other person into the ground. And I don't just mean in an intimate relationship. This could be a friendship. This could be a family member. For example, it could even be a family member who says, hey, we're moving some of your stuff out of the garage because we're going to sell the house. That could easily turn a person with borderline personality disorder into a place where they're convinced that their family's trying to abandon them. That's what I mean by it can be real or perceived abandonment, and it often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, what is the second trait?
Unstable and really intense interpersonal relationships. Now, obviously, this can be an intimate relationship, but it's any close relationship. These relationships often start passionately and closely, and they want to be with someone 24 hours a day. Then very quickly, there'll be very loud arguments that ramp up very quickly. There'll be intense passion, followed by intense anger, followed by lots of tears, and the relationships always have a roller coaster feel. Again, this can be a family relationship, it can be an intimate relationship, it can even be a friendship or even workplace relationships. Almost all of their relationships are characterized by this level of intensity.
Wow.
The third symptom we see is what we call identity disturbance. And by identity disturbance, we mean a person that almost literally doesn't know who they are. They might even ask that question out loud, I don't know who I am. And in that way, there is a chronic inside battle of who am I? Because if you don't know who you are, it's almost like you don't know how to go through the world. That identity disturbance can be manifested, for example, in a person chronically changing their appearance. Hair color, hairstyle, what they wear, tattoos, piercings, you name it, they'll change that. They might even change their name. There's a real lack of knowing who they are. In the extreme, this identity disturbance can sometimes even look like a multiple personality situation where they actually pop into multiple identities. One day they're one person. I'll say, today, baby person is here. They'll say, the next day they'll say, hey, it's me, I'm sexy such and such today. So they'll actually even sometimes have this sense of that these are different personas that they inhabit, but in general, their identity is really disrupted and chaotic.
Wow. All right, so that's 3. I already feel like 3 is 3 too many. I'm exhausted listening to those, and we're a third of the way there.
Yeah, we're a third of the way there. The fourth is impulsivity. Impulsivity is this idea of acting out or behaving in a way without thinking about it. So that could be manifested by oftentimes rather dangerous or problematic behaviors. These things could be substance use, binge eating, binge spending, gambling, impulsive sexual behavior. For example,
and when you tell me all these things, that
strangers.
sounds like a manic episode.
It can, but see, here's the thing. With the manic episode, that mania stays consistent
right,
for several days.
And borderline personality disorder could be hours.
And could be hours. So they'll act out at the moment. So that's where, for example, it wouldn't be unusual to see a borderline personality disordered individual finding themselves in major financial trouble. Because when they're feeling like they want to soothe their mood, they'll go out and shop and shop and shop. It's not unusual, for example, to see a substance use diagnosis coexisting with borderline personality, because in some ways they use it as a tool to soothe. Mm-hmm. So it's this acting out without thinking about it, not thinking about the ramifications of the behavior, and oftentimes it's a way to sort of soothe the mood at the time.
Yes.
But it can be quite dangerous for the person.
And while they're doing that, they're not addressing the problem. These are all Band-Aids.
They're all Band-Aids, but at the moment they're not thinking of it even as a Band-Aid. It's almost like the sense of, I don't want to feel this way, so I'm going to do something. So in the short term, it actually feels like a good strategy.
Right.
Now I feel different.
Yes.
Isn't this great? Without thinking like, whoa, I just spent $5,000 that I don't have.
That's right.
Right.
Yes. Okay. All right. What is the fifth trait with somebody who has borderline personality disorder?
The fifth trait is actually a rather dangerous one. This is where we often see recurrent suicidal behavior or suicidal thoughts. People with borderline personality disorder have relatively high rates of suicide attempts. Now, these suicide attempts may be a way at times, for example, to avoid that sense of abandonment. I'll show you. You think you're going to leave me? And they'll harm themselves. So that will draw the person back, trying to keep them safe.
It's the person saying, if you leave me, I'll kill myself.
If you leave me, I'll kill myself. Or they'll call a person while they're in the midst of taking pills or harming themselves and saying, hey, I just want you to know this is what I'm doing. Most other human beings would come to their side. Now they haven't been abandoned.
Of course.
This also can manifest in other behavioral patterns. For example, you might see cutting. So a person may cut their arm. Now that is considered sort of a suicidal gesture because I could ultimately harm them, or a self-harming gesture. So that all falls in that place. But like I said, this can be dangerous because even if the person with borderline personality disorder didn't, if you will, intend to die, they were actually using it as a cry for help, it can go too long. For example, they may actually take too many pills and it would be too late. They may actually attempt to hang themselves and actually hang themselves or strangle themselves. So this is where it becomes a very dangerous disorder from a management perspective. And again, it's often a response to this inner pain that they feel like they cannot manage. It's almost as though in that moment, they want to be alive, but at the same time they want to be dead because they can't manage that pain. And that's a lot of that borderline back and forth.
I want to take a moment just right there to tell the viewers that if they themselves ever feel that way, to the bottom of this video there are links to the suicide prevention hotline. And if you know somebody who may have, at this point, these traits, make sure you go to medcircle.com and utilize those free resources and get on the digest for borderline personality disorder, because this is always changing. We're always learning more, and the first step is to know about it. That's the first step. That's why you're watching this video, because you want to know about it. Now the next step is to go in deeper and really keep that education up to date. So when you say stuff like that, where we're actually talking about a potential life and death scenario, I want people to know that there are resources out there. That's why we do this. That's why we're here doing this. Medcircle.com, that is your next step. What is the sixth personality, or the sixth trait of someone with BPD?
The sixth trait is something we call affective instability, which is a fancy way of saying their moods are sort of all over the place. That's where we can see those mood shifts in even a couple of hours, going from angry to sad. So it's this affective instability where moods can shift and fluctuate in a very short period of time. So the person will feel, for an individual with borderline personality disorder, it's as though they always act in line with their emotion. They don't stop to inhibit it. And that's a big issue in borderline personality, which is almost saying, I'm having a feeling, I can manage this feeling. It's as though they feel, it's like a tidal wave. It takes them over. If they feel angry, they express that anger strongly. If they feel sad, they express that anger.
Wow, I think I have the opposite problem of that. I think when I feel angry, I go, nope, I'm not going to show anybody. Or if I feel sad, I go, no, no one's going to know I'm sad.
And this is the opposite of it. So it's that mood instability is actually a very classical part of the borderline personality presentation. And it's what sort of plays into all of these other traits, because if somebody their moods are always up and down, of course their relationships are going to be all over the map. If their moods are always up and down, you can see how they don't have a stable sense of self. So it's a key hallmark of this disorder that their moods are all over the place and they have a